Welcome. This is David Parra with AARP Arizona, and this is a conversation that we have every other Thursday with IRMA Payan. And today we have a special guest. I will bring them to the screen already. Irma, hi, welcome to the show. And we have today Dr. Pete Dimas, the author, the creator, the producer, the editor of an amazing documentary on Arizona's Mexican heritage and American story. Welcome both to the show today.
Welcome, Pete.
Perfect. Yeah. So Irma, just as a way of introduction, next on the next time we are on, you wanted to talk about what exactly about the pictures, because I know you deal with the pictures. Just if you can just give us a little idea what you're talking about, and then we'll ask Pete some questions about the documentary. How does that sound?
That sounds good. What I
Good.
was going to say for our next segment is possibly helping people preserve their family photos. That's what I would hope we could hit on to, just remind people that there's some do's and don'ts when it comes to family photos.
May I assume that that would be to make them digital kind of thing?
That too, but other
Okay.
things as well. Stay tuned.
Perfect. Definitely stay tuned. I think that's going to be a good one. I think we all take pictures sometimes, and I'm talking about the new pictures, and then we don't know what to do when they're on our phone, and not to mention the ones that are only exist in print, right? They get older, and so we want to preserve all that history because it's very valuable. Thank you, Irma, and stay tuned for that segment. Dr. Dimas, on July the 22nd, July the 22nd is coming up fairly quick. We will be showing episode one in Avondale, Arizona, and people can go to our page, and I have a post there with the link about this documentary. I don't know if you have found other fans or people who have been deeply impressed at what you're doing, but I am one for sure. And I really appreciate what you're doing since day one. I know you came to my house, you showed me a couple of episodes, and I just feel that what you are doing, it is amazing. Could you let the audience know what's behind how you came up with this idea to do a documentary, what it covers, what has been the process, and then what people can expect to see on Saturday in Avondale? Saturday the 22nd, to clarify. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, what Irma's saying about the photos are very, very important. Um, and by the way, she grew up right behind my Nino's house down there on, what was it, on Yavapai? Yeah,
We were on Pima. I think you guys were on Cocopa.
yeah, something like that, yes. But anyways, it's a small town. Uh, the process for this documentary, uh, I retired in 2010 from teaching. It seems like it was yesterday, but it was much longer than that. Uh, Prior to that, I had done with my brother a rather quick documentary on the veteranos of World War II, and that was well received. And as I retired, you got to know that if you're a historian, uh, what you have is not work, but like a hobby that you get paid for. That's
Mm,
when I went to ASU and I was asked why I wanted to study history. I told him because I liked it, because I couldn't find anything on my family background. I was just
mm,
curious. And the guy told me, my advice to you is to get out of history. There's no future in it for you. And very few of us are lucky enough to get paid to do our hobby. And of course, my response was, why not me? So
mhm.
I retired in 2010, and I still had this sense in me, this hobby, and this curiosity because when I taught and when I read, didn't read much about Arizona. And it seems like everybody was interested in some other place.
Mm.
Thank goodness it's changing. And then you
Right.
had this 1070 garbage coming up where people were apparently frightened that there were so many Mexicans in Arizona. And if you understand your history, you know that's really a silly perspective.
Mm.
I mean, when you take a look at the 1930 census, of those counted, and again I say of those counted, where 30% were of Mexican descent. You look at the 2020 census, of those counted, again I stress that of those counted, again, the Mexican population or the Mexican descent population is 30%. And then you look around and see who's working on the farms, who's working out doing the labor, who's in construction, who are out on the ranches, in the mines. And you look and you understand that even though you have this fear, what you really have is the bulk of much of the work needed to develop Arizona was basically done by those of Mexican descent.
Mm.
And all you have to do is look around, it's still the same story.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another aspect. This 30% model is not going to really last because when you take a look at what's happening demographically, the majority of the population will be of Mexican descent, not too distant future.
Mm.
And that brings into focus so many issues for us as an overall society. I'm not talking just about those who call themselves Chicanos or Mexicanos or Hispanos. No. I'm talking about the whole society needs to understand how to deal with the reality that we have before us.
Mm-hmm.
You people understand the origins of Arizona. You know, when I studied at the beginning, everyone asked, well, where does the name come from? And then there's some theory that it came from some Indian term for a little spring called Alishonak.
Mm.
But Arizona really comes from a great silver strike that was just southwest of Nogales. And
Apparently, the image has frozen. We'll give it a little second. Let's see. So definitely, I don't know about you, Irma. Let's see if Pete is able to restore the image. Are you back, Pete?
Did you lose me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So basically, from the very beginning, even the name comes from those pre-existing Spanish-Mexican roots. So, and then when it comes down to forming Arizona, the outsiders that come in, the immigrants to Arizona, I'm talking about the Anglo-Americans, of course, in order to survive, they had to work with the Mexicanos that were here.
Mm-hmm.
The Santa Fe Trail, all that trade was basically a rush to get the silver that comes from Chihuahua. And if you got the silver, you got control of much of the trade that goes through the Santa Fe. And when you start looking at supplying Arizona, it comes from the Santa Fe Trail, which means that many of those freighters were Mexicanos, you know, and
Right.
all you have to do is just look below the surface. So, and since so few people have been looking at Arizona, I just thought, well, since Los Veteranos was rather easy, it shouldn't take too much work to do this. And so, you know, when you're in your 60s and you're that naive, either says something for your youthful vigor or maybe you're not getting everything.
Mm.
And so,
So you thought it was going to be kind of a simple project, but it just kept, I suppose, getting bigger and bigger. I understand you had to teach yourself technology, video editing, and all that kind of good stuff.
yeah, well, you know, when you don't have a lot of money behind you and you're doing something because you want to do it, and you end up doing a lot of things. You end up wearing
Right.
a lot of hats. And everyone thinks it's a great idea, but when push comes to shove and when the money's supposed to come in,
Mm.
it's not there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
um, but it's been really rewarding. And since so few people knew about Arizona history as a whole, I mean, people in Tucson, of course, know Tucson history. People in Flagstaff understand that. People in Yuma understand their history, but I wasn't seeing anybody who saw the whole state
Mm-hmm.
as it evolved coming together. So I thought that this would be a good introduction. And what by that I mean, there's no way that any one documentary can cover the various aspects, important aspects of the history. So the best you could do is what evolved for me was that of a video essay. My take on what's going on, of course, being a trained historian, verifying everything that I had. Okay, and in the process, I mean, I found out about my own family
Mm.
on my mother's side. They were all Sonorenses.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, some of the professors I knew at ASU, their families came from a place called Tubutama, northern
Mm.
Sonora, which, by the way, was where my grandfather was born. So it's it's interesting to see the spread of things. And so basically, I guess you'd call it a labor of love, something I love to do.
Right.
But I think it's also as a way of introducing people to various aspects that the information is there.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to go and dig it up,
Right. Right.
and it has to deal. It deals with an educational motive because
Mm.
this story needs to be out there. You can't have half your population being treated as if they're not important in the
Mm.
overall story.
Mm.
It doesn't work.
Right.
And so it's a matter to me of overall social uh, concern.
Right. Right.
And so in episode one, that's what you asked me, right?
Right.
In episode one, it's just setting up the background for everything that comes
Mm.
afterwards. I know when I was teaching, I'd ask the question, where should we start with American history?
Mm-hmm.
And people talk about, King Arthur or the Pilgrims, and I ask, well, how about starting here rather than over there?
Mm-hmm.
And so this story starts here with the movement of agriculture into Arizona from Mexico, what we call Mexico today, 4,000 years ago. And so we have to take a look at what goes on in Mexico, what brings people here,
Mm.
ball courts, all these things that are part of the trade routes. And so when you do that, then you go into central Mexico. And
Mm.
so what's going on there? And what we have there are just amazing civilizations,
Mm.
uh, huge urban areas where, interestingly enough, part of the uh, world vision is to keep things clean, unlike Europe, where the sewers were basically the streets, where you had to watch out what was coming down from the second floor. What you have in Mexico, just cleanliness. That was
Right.
part of sin, was cleansing, was filth, and so you
Mm.
had this aspect. So, but you also have huge trade routes, and regardless of what part of the world you come from, control of trade ends up meaning warfare. So you
Mm.
have development of empires that have huge armies. Don't get me wrong, you have this background of a society that has to uh, acknowledge its spiritual and its uh, interaction with others. That's very important, and you have that in these religious
Mm-hmm.
circles that are there. But you do have an empire, and that means that there are people who don't want you there. And then you have the rise of the Spanish, and there's 700 years of warfare, which means that they're going, and it's based on religion.
Mm.
What's going to happen is you're going to have the Spanish coming with a militant religious perspective, not quite as, shall we say, Christian as most people would really like, but it's there. But there's also the aspect of what is just. So the struggle for justice is something that cannot be limited to one group. It has to go across the board because we're going to have a very multiracial society. So we had to form that. And then the movement north, which is based on mining and mining that transforms the world. This is where the silver comes that the Chinese are desperate to get, that the Europeans are going to desperately go for, which is going to transform all of European society, give us modern Europe. All of that is part of that movement north. And in order to do that, you have to have ways of sustaining things, commercial connections. You have to have the way of raising the food, the ranching, the farming, all of these things that are part of what comes up into Arizona. And then you have the collision with the United States, which basically takes over half of northern Mexico. And shortly thereafter, you have the Civil War, and these new Americans, these former Mexicanos, play a very significant role in Arizona and New Mexico, the former Mexican territories, while the rest of the United States is sending everybody to the east. So you're going to have participation in the American society, allowing it to even exist based on its old Mexican roots. And that's basically the sense of episode 1 with all its conflicts and everything in there. So it's an introduction to the rest that comes.
Right. So, Pete, I really appreciate that introduction. We need to close the show because this is supposed to be, just a teaser, so to speak. But when you see the video, I mean, this is the narrative, right, of the Dr. Pete just did. But the video, the images, the sounds, it's just amazing. So we are inviting you on the 22nd of this month in Avondale. The link is on one of the posts, and I'd just like to ask Irma. Irma, you and I went to the one Dr. Dimas did on the veteranos, and you are seeing people that are in their 80s shedding tears, literally crying when they connect, when they see the connection of themselves with history. And then we just did this same episode at Chicanos por la Causa Central Park. Just give us in maybe no more than a minute just what you are, I guess, seeing in this type of offerings where Dr. Pete's documentary is shown.
I think people are thirsty for education. They want to know their history, but it wasn't taught in schools, and maybe their parents didn't share it with them. The people I'm seeing at these events, they are, like I said, thirsty for information, and they have so many questions. I encourage anybody watching this right now, write down questions for Pete. Maybe they'll be answered in his presentation, but we need to educate people and our children. Our children are growing up not knowing their history.
Right. Okay, we need to close the show. I want to thank both of you. I think, it's Dr. Dimas. He always does an amazing job in his presentation. So we are definitely inviting all of you. The link is on one of the posts. Registration is required. We will be serving a breakfast before at 9:30. And then the video will play. Dr. Dimas will be there to engage Q&As, and then we'll serve lunch. It's in Avondale. All the details are when you click on that link, you'll be able to register, and then you see the details. Again, Irma, thank you so much for joining.
All righty, we'll see you next time, learning about photos.
Definitely. And Dr. Pete Dimas, thanks again. We'll see you a week from this Saturday.
Okay, good. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much. We'll see you. All right. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.